it. I hope to always be a partner in the thing. And you have to assume equality when you're interacting between cultures. So there really is a deep analogy here. We sometimes use the metaphor that intersexual dialogue is like stereophonic sound. You know, you have two good speakers at the right distance apart, and you have a depth to the sound which you don't get with your one speaker. Or you have stereoscopic vision, where your two eyes work together to create a depth, and you don't get that just with one eye. So when you have two voices bringing their histories and their academic expertise from many different disciplines together, that should create some kind of a depth with etiquette and goodwill, we hope brings us to another part. So this needs to be an experiment, you know, and we're thinking now, well, maybe it's time to stop thinking so much and writing so much and perhaps work with marriage counselors or work with people who help resolve disputes, conflict resolution, and so forth, to try to see if people with those kinds of expertise can also help us in this dialogue, this very practical dialogue between men and women, and then, of course, the larger groups in society that we represent.
Now, two questions here, actually. The first is, you've mentioned the list of 10 points regarding dialogue. Now, is there actually a place people can go to find that? I presume it's in one of your books. Yeah. Which one?
The unpublished one.
The unpublished one. You'll have to wait for that then.
The volume 5, that's the culmination, although we wrote that several years ago, but that is the culmination of the entire series. The section on dialogue is the explicit statement of our moral vision. And it provides, I think, the ultimate justification for what we're doing. We're not just throwing stats at each other, we're saying, you know, we can make a better world than this.
Now, this very strong focus on listening that you brought up and letting people speak with their own voices, it really seems to run counter to the idea that a huge number of people are throwing out, that people advocating on behalf of men, all they really want to do is just talk over women and steamroller women and shut women out of that dialogue.
Well, some do. We don't, but some do. You have to acknowledge that. You know, you can go to these websites and you can see men ranting and screaming, but of course you can also find that on feminist websites. So we want to get beyond that. But it is a problem.
But that's also where the university is so important, because it's got a history of trying to understand complex issues and learning about them protected in the open environment. And if the university loses that, or refuses to engage in a topic that may not be particularly popular at a given moment, then where is our forum for this kind of dialogue?
Now, I don't know what the time, I'm going to sort of take over. I want to add something here that we've somehow missed, and that is, we talked a bit about identity. I want to be more clear about what the problem of identity is. That to have, our hypothesis is that to have a healthy identity, either as an individual or as a group, you must be able to make at least one contribution to the larger society that is A, necessary, B, distinctive, and C, publicly valued. Now, the problem for men, and maybe for women too, but the problem for men has been that their ability to make a healthy identity based on contributions to society is becoming more and more limited. And as Catherine mentioned, we've traced this through the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, and various other technological changes. Now, what it boils down to is at the moment that some of the traditional sources of masculine identity are really no longer legitimate. I mean, warrior is not going to be very effective in defining manhood at this point. Women can, and in fact do, defend themselves either by themselves or with the help of the state. Women can also provide for themselves, either by themselves or with the help of the state. There's only one thing that men still can do that is distinctive, and that is fatherhood. So then the question becomes, well, what is distinctive about fatherhood? And there are plenty of people and plenty of phenomena in the world that we see every day that basically say there is nothing distinctive about it. Fathers are either assistant mothers, they're walking wallets, they might be potential molesters. I mean, there are all sorts of ways of getting rid of the idea that fathers have a distinctive role in family life. And so one of the things that we do in Volume 4, having gone through this history of masculine identity, is we confront this question of how, do we have a need for fathers? And if we don't, what is the price that all of society will pay? Not only children, but society as a whole.
So that basically closes up the section on identity, I think. Is there anything you want to add there?
No.
Okay. Now, when I was preparing to do this, when I was asked to do this, an article by Jesse McLaren in Socialist Worker, I'm sure everybody's already a little worried about that just from the tagline, is very interesting because it includes a lot of very familiar arguments about, or really rather against, caring for men and boys. This gives us a bit of a checklist of talking points to just run through to look at some of these major issues. One of the cool things is that while he does attack basically every form of advocacy for men, he does seem to grudgingly acknowledge some of the problems men face. We see this fairly often, people who are really viciously opposed to any advocacy by or for men, but who do admit the truth of at least some of the core issues we're talking about. Would you say that's some degree of progress?
Well, to the extent that he acknowledges those things, but in the same breath, as it were, trivializes them, I don't think we're very far in the direction that we would like to go. I mean, if you can acknowledge those things and say, yeah, no, we really have to study those things. Meanwhile, there are these other things that I want to discuss. Even that would be better. I mean, he talks, for example, about, well, you know, women have all these health concerns. Oh yeah? Well, you know, it's true. But what about the longevity gap between men and women? Where's the research on this? He doesn't even mention that. He doesn't even acknowledge that. Frankly, I think that, you know, that's about as existential problems you can get, life and death.
Sorry, can we get that, please? Thanks.
Okay.
Oh, okay. You're actually through that. Now, another one of those core points is that basically, because advocates for boys and men often criticize some of the ideas and especially some of the actions that have come out of the feminist movement, they're inherently or inevitably misogynist.
It's always nice to have a partner so that when you're caught daydreaming, you
By the way, this is just a by the way, our whole notion of dialogue actually relies heavily on the experience that we have had. You know, we have a straight woman, a gay man, we have a Christian or a former Christian, a Jew. So that's okay. So that's a beside the point. Well, you know, these things come into my head. My mind is not so linear that I don't go off on the byways. So I'm sorry, what was the question?
Basically, it was focusing on the idea that anything that criticizes feminism, whether it's some of their beliefs, some of their actions, or just some of the processes that they're using to get sometimes from one to the other, anyone who criticizes that is just inherently misogynist.
Well, you know, I came across a website, well, more than one website, and there is an interesting piece of news from Scandinavia. There's something called the Nordic Council. And the Nordic Council is a kind of governmental agency. I'm not sure what governmental status it has. It's an advisory group that brings together people from, you know, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. and they discuss